الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I had promised you last time that I would have a PowerPoint, and I do have a PowerPoint. The problem is I have forgotten my laptop at home. So unfortunately we'll have to make do with what we have, and I hope you can follow along. Before I begin, subhanAllah, today has been a very, very difficult day for me. SubhanAllah, it's there's a very dear sister in our community in Toronto who would do a lot of media work, and somebody who was like an elder sister to me. She had actually moved to Somalia. She was Canadian born and raised, but then moved back to Somalia to get married, and we settled there. She wanted to share these stories about the positive things happening in Somalia. And subhanAllah, today when I was just on Instagram browsing through, and I see people are posting messages of condolences that she has she's passed away, and I was like, what, subhanAllah, this is unbelievable. And then it turns out that she didn't pass away. She was actually she was with her husband at a beach, and they were staying in this place called Kismayo in Somalia, and there was a terrorist attack. It was a bomb or a shooting, and she actually died with her husband in that attack, subhanAllah. And it was just like, I don't even know what to even, I don't even know how to feel right now, because it's such a shocking thing to hear about. And I was actually going through, because as we would correspond on Instagram, and sometimes we correspond over WhatsApp. So I was reading the messages a little bit, and I actually couldn't even read the messages that we had previously just corresponded on, because it's so shocking to see someone who was here yesterday and today they're taken away. So it's a very, this happened I think around after 5 p.m. or something. So it's been very, very a difficult time for those of us who were inspired by her work and were touched by her work, but of course for her family is even worse. Like, she has a son that's outlived her, and he's a small kid. He's only like 10 or 11 years old. So may Allah make it, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for that child, and may Allah accept her as a shaheed. May Allah bring the perpetrators to justice and hold them to account for taking away all these lives from us. And it's such a sad thing, because here's a person who went back to showcase the good that's happening in the Muslim world, and the Muslim world ends up taking her life. So it's a very, very sad reality, and it just like the Prophet said when his son passed away, that the heart is grieved. Innal qalba la yahzan wa innal ayna la tadma wa innal qalba la yahzan. That the heart is grieved and the eyes are overflowing with tears, but we only say what pleases our Lord. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. So please remember her in your du'as. Remember her family in your du'as. Those who died in that attack, we don't know who they are because they weren't famous. Remember their families in our du'as. SubhanAllah, I don't even know if we would have found out that something happened in that part of the world, unless it was like a Canadian journalist who died there. And that's how we ended up finding out, SubhanAllah. So even we pray that Allah brings justice, and also may Allah bring swift accountability on the people who have done this. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. That said, we still have to talk about the topic at hand, which is our improving our prayer, the ways we can improve our prayer. What we had covered, it covered 9 main ideas or 9 main suggestions. Some of them are, you could break it down in parts. Part 1 was like a mindset. The mindset of understanding the salah, its importance, how critical it is, and understanding what it means to establish it, not just pray it, but establish it. That was, I think, that you can say part 1 is the mindset. Part 2 was stuff before salah, such as removing distractions, making sure that wudu is done properly, making sure that a person comes on time and is not late habitually to the salah. Part 3 is things we could do during the prayer to make best practices during the prayer. And then we covered that last time a little bit, and I'll conclude that today. And part 4 would be suggestions to make the prayer more engaging. Okay, things to help make the salah more engaging, more meaningful, where our minds and our hearts are connected to our Lord when we're praying. Okay, things that I had suggested that we should do during the prayer is keep the sizes of the rak'ahs consistent, the units of the prayer, keep them as consistent as possible. If one is really long and one is really short, it's not the best idea. As close as consistency you can achieve, the better. We spoke also about the critical stages of the prayer, the 4 critical stages: the bowing, the ruku', the standing, the sajdah, the prostration, the sitting between the 2 sajdahs, trying to make them equal in length to the best of our abilities. That was a way the Prophet ﷺ used to pray. Being very still while we're standing and sitting, making sure that we're not jittery, we're not moving and shaking, taking some time, to the point where when the Sahaba were describing the Prophet's prayer, they would say he would be so still sometimes that a person could say, قَدْ نَسِي, he's forgotten that he's praying. And the last suggestion I shared last time was this: don't make the salah too long that it becomes overburdening. When we're trying to pray and focus and do our best, it's difficult to focus for that long. So the sunnah of the Prophet is to make it short, make it sweet, make it complete, and that is something that we should inspire to as well. Okay, those were the 9 suggestions we had covered before in the last 2 sessions. Continuing on with what to do during the prayer. Okay, number 10 today is to look at the place of the prostration. When you are standing, the sajdah, when a person is making sajdah, looking at the place of prostration. And when you're in ruku', in bowing, standing again, obviously when you're in the sajdah, you're looking at the place of sajdah. And when you're sitting, okay, in all those stages, looking at the place of what? Sajdah. It is recommended that when you are sitting in the last rak'ah or the second rak'ah, and you're reciting at-tahiyatu lillah was-salawatu wat-tayyibat, that you look at your finger, right? The finger that is supposed to point when you say ashhadu la ilaha illallah, whether you do it at the moment or you keep it stable the whole time. It is recommended you look at it. This is something that is also from the sunnah. But outside of that state, every time else, it is recommended to look where during prayer? At the place of sajdah. Okay. This is very critical. The Prophet is described, he says, دخل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الكعبة ما خلف بصره موضع سجوده حتى خرج منها. This is the description of the Prophet entering Al-Kaaba, the grand mosque in Mecca, and praying there. And he did not move his eyesight from the place of sajdah until he exited the prayer and left the Kaaba. The idea, the reason why this person is describing the Prophet praying and looking at the place of sajdah in the haram is because when a person is praying in the haram, the temptation is what? To look at the Kaaba, right? You're like, I'm praying right in front of the Kaaba, it's right there, right? Anybody prayed in the made Umrah or Hajj here? A few people, okay. By the way, if you want to join me on Umrah, I'm inshallah going in November. I will tell you some more details. It'll be really nice. Maybe we can be roommates. The interesting thing is, so I prayed a few times in the Haram, and it was a fun time. Is this? I prayed right in front. It was the first row of the world. So the Kaaba is like right in front of you. Like imagine this is the wall of the Kaaba. You're praying right there. So it's nice. But the idea is, even if you're praying there, you're supposed to look down at the place of sajdah, and of course, every other time you're supposed to look down at the place of sajdah. This achieves 2 things. It achieves, number 1, a sense of humbleness, right? The head lowered, and lowering our head specifically in all times during the prayer is a expression of humility and humbleness. And that is one of the objectives of the prayer. That is also one of the objectives of life as a Muslim, to have humility and humbleness in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and with the people as well. So it achieves that objective. It also achieves the objective of cutting out anything that is visually distracting. Our eyes tend to move with movement, right? If somebody walked in the door right now, most probably you would turn and look who came in. Okay? If I got up and started walking around, your eyes would trace my movements as I'm walking around, right? Like you won't just look at the mic as that's stagnant, or the table that's stagnant. You will look at the thing that's moving. This is just the way we are. So when we're praying and there's movement around us, maybe we're praying our sunnah prayer and there's people moving around. Maybe we're praying our fard prayer and there's people in the row, they're moving or they're doing things that are distracting. Probably in a person's peripheral vision, right? You will probably see it like from the sides. But if the focus is on that spot, the place of the sajdah, that cuts down those distractions quite significantly. And it doesn't mean a person will not be distracted, but it really does cut it down. SubhanAllah. Is it locked? Tahir uncle, would you like to? Can you swipe the fob?
Yeah.
No, do you have the fob?
Yeah.
Oh, you have. Okay, very good. So it cuts that out. What also is helpful sometimes is to close the eyes. Now, it is not recommended to close the eyes while praying the whole time. That's not recommended. Why is that not recommended? The Prophet ﷺ did not do that, and because he particularly didn't do this, the scholars say this is not a recommended action. Okay. However, to maybe if you are, it happens with particularly parents of young kids. If you're looking and like your kid is doing something random on the side, you're gonna end up looking like, what are they doing, right? So sometimes closing the eyes is a real helpful thing. Sometimes people who are in the masjid, they will start looking at you when they're praying, right? And you're like, can you stop looking at me? So all those things happen. The idea is maybe closing the eyes for a little bit does help. It helps regain concentration. So there is no problem in that. The Prophet ﷺ said that the Aisha radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet, asked the Prophet ﷺ about looking around in the prayer. Someone who's like looking around in the prayer. The Prophet ﷺ said that is ikhtilasun yakhtalisuhu ash-shaytan min al-abd. It is like the Satan is just taking away, like just chipping away at your ajr, chipping away at your good deeds. Like he can't stop you from praying. You're praying. That's like, so what's the best course of action for him? Let's try to take as much away from your prayer as he can. So this is one of his strategies, to take away from a person's prayer and chip away at it. So all that is addressed by looking at the place of the sajdah. There is at the same time a nuance when it comes to gesturing during salah. Gesturing or even certain types of movements are allowed. Okay, so during the fard prayer, the obligatory prayer, you are to minimize all extra movements. Everything that's unnecessary is to be minimized. Only in circumstances where you have to, like for example, if there is a bug, or there's a little snake or something. They've described this in the books. If there's a snake that's crawling around while you're praying, you're not supposed to just stand there and wait to be bit. Okay, you can step up and kill the snake while you're praying. Okay, it's one of the few animals you can actually kill, a poisonous snake. Otherwise, you're not supposed to kill it. You're supposed to kind of shoo it away. So you're not supposed to just stand there and say, I'm in prayer, I can't do anything. Oh, I just got bit. You're not supposed to be like this. However, it is in the optional prayers there is more leeway. there's more leeway. The Prophet ﷺ would, he would, for example, pray the optional prayers in his home. His home was small. His wife is lying in front of him, Aisha radiallahu anha. And then when he would go into sajdah, he would, tap her legs, and she would, fold them out of the way, and he would make the sajdah. And then when he gets up, she puts her legs back, stretches it back. So every time he's doing this, he's tapping her on the legs and she's moving it out of the way. So in the optional prayers, that's okay. A little bit of that extra movement is not a problem. There's even allowances for somebody if you're praying inside in a room and someone's knocking on the door and you're praying your optional prayer, you can just open the door if you can. Take a few steps, open the door and continue your salah. But in the mandatory prayers, it is to be minimized unless there's an emergency, unless there's a threat. Why is this important? This is important because if you are praying, say, at the airport, okay, and someone's like, what is this guy doing? Hopefully now people know that there is something called prayer. It's so common. But assume you're in, I don't know, Mississippi. No one has seen you pray. And you're praying, and someone looks at you and starts coming up and saying things to you. You can gesture with your hand. You can gesture by saying give me a minute or something, or some hand gesture to explain what you're doing. It's not that, it will not take away from the prayer. However, those things are on a case-by-case basis allowed in the process of the salah. I remember I was praying in the university MSA. I went to Waterloo. So there was a little area of the building that all the engineering students, like the master's students, they had that area. And all of them were Muslims. It was all brothers, right? So what they had done is that, the joke in Waterloo is that if you, when you graduate from engineering, you have a Arab accent. Because all your TAs are Arabs. There's a little corridor, a little corner of the corridor that they had made a musalla for themselves. Because they're all sitting there, right? So they want to pray Zuhr or Asr. Like, okay, let's pray here. So it became like a musalla in the unofficial musalla. So we were praying, and some brothers are very overzealous and they're reciting Quran loudly. So the campus police comes and they're like, what's happening here? Right? So it's a really awkward situation. They don't know what's happening. This is a campus police, right? You don't want to make a scene. So it's okay. And the brother who was leading our prayer was knowledgeable enough. He gestured to the police, give us a minute or something like that. And then the guy was just waiting for us. He finished prayer, and then we had a conversation on what was happening. So it is something that is good. The prayer isn't just supposed to make you completely oblivious of your surroundings. All that said, focus should be on looking at the place of the sajdah. So that's number 10. Questions about that? There's many intertwined discussions that are taking place. Alhamdulillah. Number 11 is to be very particular when making ruku'. When making the ruku', right? So Khalid, since I have the mic on, I will ask you, can you come and be a demonstrator for us? Khalid's like, it's the first time I come to the lecture and this guy is doing this to me. Sorry, Khalid. Jazakallah khair. Alright, facing that way, can you make ruku'? Excellent. Very good. Close enough. Can you try to maybe make your back a little straighter? There we go. So that, mashallah, right there, right? The idea is I can place an object on Khalid's back, and mashallah, the object is quite stable. If Khalid was not as you can stop now, it's okay. I don't want you to sprain your hamstrings. If he wasn't so straight, the object is probably sliding down his back. So the idea is that the back should be straight in the ruku'. This is suggestion number 11. Back is straight during the ruku'. The Prophet ﷺ is described, كَانَ إِذَا رَكَعَ لَمْ يَشْخَصْ رَأْسَهُ وَلَمْ يُصَوِّبْهُ وَلَكِنْ بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ. His back would be straight. It was not completely down. It wasn't completely up. It was straight. It was parallel to the ground. His back was parallel to the ground. And this, now you add it to the whole routine of the prayer, the suggestions, making the lengths equal of the ruku', the standing, the sajdah, the sitting. Now, being very still when standing, being very still when in sajdah. Very still while standing and very still while sitting. Then having the back parallel to the ground while in ruku'. You put all that together, and if a person is actively trying to achieve all of these things, that's a lot of thinking going on. Okay, that helps a person concentrate, not drift away into just routine. So this is a very beautiful suggestion of the from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. He also said ﷺ once that أسوأ الناس صديقة الذي يسرق من صلاته لا يتم ركوعها ولا سجودها ولا خشوعها. He said one of the worst things a person could do, example of, or the metaphor of a thief, is somebody who is stealing from their prayer. Okay, this is a person. How are they stealing from their prayer? Their ruku' is not fulfilled and it's not complete. Meaning their back isn't straight. They're fidgeting. They're not spending the required time in it. Neither are they doing the same thing in the sajdah. Neither are they concentrating and having humility. So all of this is related, and it's addressed if a person spends enough time in that state and the back is straight while they are in that situation. So that's number 11 during the prayer. Okay, all these are small tips you can incorporate throughout your prayer. Number 12. This is the long one. This is where I wish I had my PowerPoint, but qadar Allah. I will though, inshallah, if you want to share the notes with you. Okay, like the notes are there. There's a whole bunch of Arabic notes. If you can read that, alhamdulillah, good for you. If you can't, at least the English translation is there. If you want the notes, just tell me or give me your email address. I'll email them to you. This is not like proprietary information or anything. The 12th thing is to make sure that all the pillars of the prayer are being performed correctly. Okay? Now, there are the pillars of the prayer. If that's not done, the prayer does not count. The prayer does not count. You have to do that raka'ah, pray that raka'ah again, or pray the whole prayer again, depending on which pillar you have missed. Then there is the obligatory acts of the prayer. They have to be performed, but if a person misses them, they forgot about it, then there is the sajdah of forgetfulness, sajdah to sahu. That's what it's called, like a salam. The sajdah of forgetfulness makes up for it. Lastly, there is the recommendations of the prayer. The recommendations are all the other things. You miss them, no harm done, right? Your prayer is fine. You don't miss them, you do them, mashallah, good for you. You are earning more reward. Okay? The reason why the pillars are so critical is because the pillars are the bare bones of the salah. Okay? So what it does is it tells you what it is at the absolute minimum that a person has to do. What I like to do sometimes is pray the bare bones salah sometimes. Okay? Just the arkaan. Because it's a refreshing change. It refreshes the way you pray. All of a sudden you realize the prayer is only these things and everything else is, added on, it's optional, it's, a nice to have. So let's just talk about what the pillars are, the arkaan. The hadith that describes the pillars of the prayer is a very famous hadith in which a man, it's called a hadith of the person, al-musi'i salatuhu, the person who messed up his prayer. But even in our tradition, it's nice when someone does something wrong, they recorded the hadith, they talk about it, they analyze it, but the Sahabi who messed up, his name is not mentioned. In no book you find his name to be mentioned. This is actually a very beautiful trend, or very beautiful habit of the companions, that whenever someone messed up, they wouldn't just cover that up. They would teach it to the people, okay? But they wouldn't say who it was. And sometimes it would turn to speculation. Like sometimes it was a wife of the Prophet who did something, and then turned to which one was it? Who did this? Right? It became like a little gossiping thing, and then it's not a good thing for people to gossip about. The Sahaba were doing the right thing by covering up the flaws of the people. That is a very critical aspect of Islamic etiquette, covering people's flaws and not exposing them. The Prophet said that a person who covers the flaws of their brother in this world, Allah will cover their flaws up on the Day of Judgment. This is from the etiquettes of Islam. We're not supposed to be going out and just exposing people, or even casually deriding them. Okay, it's not befitting of the manners of a believer. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum taught us that by the way they transmitted their religion to us, and our scholars lived by that. In the hadith literature, part of the job of the muhaddith is to tell you this person is a reliable narrator, and this person is not reliable. Okay, so his job is to say good person as a narrator, bad person as a narrator. Okay, that's their job. Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah, the great scholar of hadith, he was so legendary at this, where he would tell you the information you need to know. This is a person you should accept narration of hadith from. This is a person you should not accept narration of hadith from, while not exposing the guilty party in any way, while not having any type of character assassination of the guilty party. He would say things like, okay, someone would ask him, Imam, why is this hadith, or why is this hadith not in your book, or what is your opinion on this hadith? He would say, this hadith is not sahih. Why is this hadith not authentic? Well, it's not authentic because there is a person in it who, he would say, fihi nazar. Something should be looked into regarding them. And him just saying that, this person, in my opinion, fihi nazar. There's something to, some more, what's the word here? Like, some more digging has to be done about them. That gave the person who was asking the question the idea that Imam Bukhari did not trust this person to narrate hadith. For whatever reason it was the case. But the beauty of the way he would convey the flaw is he wouldn't convey all the flaws of this person's character. He would just say, I don't accept hadith from this person, and there is more to be looked at in this person. That's it. So it's an incredible way of doing your job while also not exposing your fellow Muslim, while not also exposing them for eternity. Imagine if Imam Bukhari wrote about a person saying this person had this flaw and this flaw and this flaw, that would be like everybody till like the end of time will be reading that person and knowing how bad they were. But he covered their mistakes because that's the etiquettes of our religion. We don't expose people. So here is a person who made a mistake. We have no idea who his name is. And that's a beautiful thing, something to appreciate. So he comes to the masjid. The Prophet is sitting with a bunch of Sahaba. Okay, they're all sitting there, and he comes and he prays quickly, and then he goes to the Prophet and he says, Assalamu alaikum. The Prophet says to him, Wa alayka salam, wa alaykum salam, irji' fasalli fa innaka lam tusalli. Go back and pray because you haven't prayed. The man goes back and prays again. Comes back to the Prophet, says Assalamu alaikum. The Prophet says, Wa alaykum salam, and says again, irji' fasalli fa innaka lam tusalli. Go back and pray, for you have not prayed. Third time the same thing happened. Third time he says salam. The third time the Prophet ﷺ says to him, you have not prayed, go back and pray again. Okay, at this point the man says, he says, وَالَّذِي بَعَثَكَ بِالْحَقِّ, the person, I swear by the one who sent you with the truth. That's a way of saying, I swear by Allah. لَا أُحْسِنُ غَيْرَهَا, I can't do any better. عَلِّمْنِي, teach me. So then the Prophet taught him the prayer. The Prophet ﷺ said to him, إِذَا قُمْتَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَكَبِّرْ, when you are intending to pray. When you are intending to pray. So you stand up and you say, Allahu Akbar, kabbir. Say, Allahu Akbar. And as you're saying, Allahu Akbar, you raise your hands as well. ثُمَّ قْرَأْ مَا تَيَسَّرَ مَعَكَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ, then recite whatever is easy for you from the Quran. Then ثُمَّ ارْكَعْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ رَاكِعًا. Then make ruku'. Go into ruku' after recitation until you are تَطْمَئِنَّ رَاكِعًا. You are at peace. You are at peace in your ruku'. ثُمَّ ارْفَعْ حَتَّى تَعْتَدِلَ قَائِمًا. Then raise your head. سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ. And once you're standing, حَتَّى تَعْتَدِلَ قَائِمًا, until you are straight and upright and restful, like you're not moving, it's stationary. ثُمَّ اسْجُدْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ سَاجِدًا. Then make sajdah until you are peaceful in the sajdah. تَطْمَئِنَّ سَاجِدًا. This word repeats in this hadith 3 times. ثُمَّ ارْفَعْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ جَالِسًا. The 3rd time. Then sit up between the 2 sajdas until you are peaceful in your prayer. Until you are peaceful in your sitting. ثُمَّ فَعَلْ ذَلِكَ فِي صَلَاتِكَ كُلِّهَا. And then do this for the rest of your prayer. Okay? This hadith describes most of the pillars of the prayer. Okay? The pillars of the prayer are as follows. Number 1 is standing up. That is a pillar of the prayer. If a person cannot stand up because they are injured, because they cannot stand for whatever reason, or maybe they're in the plane. You can't really stand and pray in the plane unless, it's a Saudi airline plane or something. You can sit and pray, no problem. Everything else, you have to stand up for the prayer. Okay? Number 2 is Allahu Akbar. The initial takbirah, Allahu Akbar. Raising the hands is something that is recommended, but the requirement is to say Allahu Akbar. Okay? Number 3 is recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. Recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. Surah Al-Fatiha is recited every rak'ah when you're praying by yourself. Okay? Whether it is an obligatory prayer or an optional prayer, every single time you have to recite it. If you're praying behind an imam, the imam is leading you in salah, then you don't have to recite when the imam is reciting. Okay, so like we'll pray Isha, for example. Which rak'ahs will the imam recite loudly? First two rak'ahs. You don't have to read Surah Fatiha in the first 2 rak'ahs. But in the 3rd rak'ah and the 4th rak'ah, you should read it. Okay? There is a difference of opinion. Imam Abu Hanifa says you don't have to read it at all. Okay? And he has very strong evidence to support his position. But the safer position, in my opinion, is read when the imam is silent, the 3rd or 4th rak'ah, but don't read when the imam is reading. Like Imam Ahmad says, وَيَتَحَمَّلُهَا الْإِمَامِ. The imam takes the responsibility of your Surah Fatiha. So that is the case. But Surah Fatiha is a pillar of the prayer, irrespective of whether you're praying by yourself or whether you're praying in the congregation. It's just a matter of who's doing it on your behalf. That's why you can come and join the prayer in the ruku'. Does that count as you have caught the rak'ah? If we're in ruku', you catch the salah in the ruku', does that count? It counts, right? Did you read Surah Fatiha? No, you didn't, unless you read Surah Fatiha before you get into ruku', and you can't do that, right? Just go straight into ruku'. The reason is because the imam has read it on your behalf. So the pillar has been fulfilled by the imam, and you praying is like de facto, your pillar has been performed. Number 4 is the ruku'. Number 4 is the ruku'. Number 5 is standing up from ruku'. And at all the steps, like Allahu Akbar in the beginning, Allahu Akbar going down into ruku', Sami Allahu liman hamida coming up from the ruku'. These are all parts of the arkaan. Number 5 is that to stand up. Number 6 is to. Oh, sorry, my numbering is wrong here. 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Number 6 is as-sujud, to make the sajdah. Number 7 is to sit between the 2 sajdas and being in that situation. Number 8 is having peace in the prayer, tuma'nina. Number 9 is the at-tashahhud al-akhir, the last tashahhud. Number 10 is sitting in that last tashahhud. Number 11 is the salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. Number 13 is the ordering of the prayer. And the last one, number 14 is Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum. Okay? These are the arkaan of the prayer. Now let me repeat that again. From this hadith, the Prophet said to him, you stand up and you say Allahu Akbar. Standing up is a pillar. Saying Allahu Akbar is a pillar. Reciting the Fatiha is a pillar. Ruku' is a pillar. Standing up from the ruku' is a pillar. Back in the sajdah is a pillar. Sitting between the two is a pillar. Being calm is a pillar. Recitation of the tashahhud, at-tahiyyatu lillah, is a pillar. The salawat on the Prophet at the very end, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad, a pillar. Doing this in order. I cannot do tashahhud first and then Surah Fatiha second. The order has to be kept, is a pillar. And saying Assalamu alaikum is a pillar. Now, this is the bare bones of the prayer that the Prophet ﷺ describes for this person. The focus should be making sure these aspects are done correctly. Okay? Maybe you lose concentration after Surah Fatiha. That happens. But in Fatiha, don't lose concentration. Maybe you lose concentration towards the end of the prayer. But in ruku', try to regain that concentration. In sajdah, try to regain the concentration. The pillars are the opportunities where we should try to re-engage and make sure that they're being performed correctly. These are the pillars, and the Prophet ﷺ describes it to this person in this hadith. Now, there is two more things from this hadith that I'll point out. Okay? Number one is, why did the Prophet ﷺ ask this person to go back and pray again? Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Subhanallah. You would say, like as a educator, you would say, well, why didn't you just explain to him the first time and let him pray correctly the first time? Okay? The answer lies in the Prophet ﷺ's answer. Okay? When the Prophet ﷺ is giving this person instruction of how to pray, he doesn't tell him every single thing in the prayer. He doesn't tell him about at-tahiyyatu lillah, right? He doesn't tell him about Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum. He tells him only very few specific things. That tells you this man knew how to pray. This man knew how the prayer is. You stand up, you say Allahu Akbar, you recite Quran, you go into ruku'. He knew the prayer. But there was something in his prayer that was missing. So the Prophet ﷺ wanted to highlight the missing element. And the missing element of his prayer was the peace. The missing element of his prayer was the peace. The Prophet ﷺ probably wanted him to say, you know what, maybe the first time he's rushed because he quickly wants to come join the circle. So he told him to go back and pray again. But the peace was missing again. And that happened the second time and the third time. Now, when the Prophet is describing the prayer to him, you notice he's emphasizing on the part that he missed. He starts with what he did right, standing up, Allahu Akbar, all those pieces of the prayer. He starts with what he has done right. Then he moves to what he doesn't do right. And that is where he repeats himself 3 times to make sure this man gets the point. This is actually, in teaching psychology, one of the best ways to explain and correct a person's error. Okay? If you are teaching, say someone language acquisition, okay? If I just drop vocabulary on their head, guess what's going to happen? They won't learn anything. Okay? But the better way to teach vocabulary acquisition, for example, is the person uses the vocabulary, they're wrong in it, right? They say a sentence, half of it is right and half of it is wrong. You repeat the sentence, starting with what they said right, and then highlighting with your tone what they said wrong. Okay? So kids talk to parents and they're often using like bad grammar, right? They would say something like, oh, why is he crying? When they want to say, why is she crying, a baby, right? So you would say, do you mean to say why is she crying? You emphasize the wrong part with your tone, but you start with what's right. This is something that people like Stephen Krashen and others who are scholars of linguistics have pointed out, of how correction needs to happen in the sphere of education. Okay? This is actually a very well established theory. The Prophet ﷺ, subhanAllah, is actually acting upon this. He's actually implementing that. He starts with what the man did right. إِذَا قُمْتَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَكَبِّرْ. Then he moves to what he doesn't do wrong. Then he moves to what he does wrong, and he points that out, not necessarily by a change of tone, but by repetition. حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ رَاكِعًا حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ سَاجِدًا حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ جَالِسًا. That it stands out for this person. So it's actually a very beautiful and very, by modern pedagogical standards, it's a very beautiful way of teaching somebody. Particularly somebody who's an adult. Particularly in adult education, this applies even more. So the Prophet ﷺ did a very beautiful thing. Perhaps it is lost on people why he did this. And the subtlety is even like in the books of hadith, they don't explain these subtleties sometimes because, a human being is a human being. You can't explain everything. But I particularly was very fascinated by this one. I looked it up in quite a lot of detail. And my conclusion was that this was the model of correction and verification that the Prophet ﷺ was following. That is quite in line with today's teaching psychological techniques that we have. Start with what's right and emphasize the wrong, either with a tone change or with some sort of other type of emphasis. So this is a beautiful way. The 13th point from this that we can extract and that we will conclude with is the idea of calmness and peace. Okay? The pillars are described. As you notice, all the pillars are actions. Standing, Allahu Akbar, Surah Fatiha, ruku', they're all actions. One of them, as mentioned by the books of fiqh, and as mentioned by all scholars of fiqh, of jurisprudence, is calmness and peace. Calmness and peace is made a pillar of the prayer. It's as if you were missing the calmness and peace, it's like you didn't recite Surah Fatiha. It's like you didn't make sajdah. That's how big a deal it is in the eyes of the scholars of Islam. Why is it such a big deal? The Prophet emphasized it 3 times. And this man's prayer was only missing that part. He wasn't missing anything else. And the Prophet told him repeatedly, go back and pray, for you haven't prayed. So it tells you, if the calmness is missing, if the tranquility in the prayer is missing, the prayer itself is missing the point. Okay? The scary part is we don't have the Prophet ﷺ watching our prayer, telling us, you messed up, go pray again. We only have ourselves watching ourselves. We have to be holding ourselves accountable to that. Calmness and peace is not concentration the entire time. 2 different things. Concentration in the entire time is khushu', humility, humbleness. That is a hard thing. It's not a pillar though. It's very much recommended. It's the objective. That's what we want. It's not a pillar. Okay? The pillar is calmness. What is calmness? You look at the word تَطْمَئِنَّ رَاكِعًا تَطْمَئِنَّ سَاجِدًا. The word طُمَأْنِينَ linguistically means something that is not moving. It is the opposite of movement. That's what it is. The opposite of something that is moving and fidgeting. The ayah of the Quran that says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَطْمَئِنُّ قُلُوبُهُمْ بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. The people who believe and their hearts find rest and peace in the remembrance of Allah. It is truly in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find peace. Now there's a very nice little play on words here in the Arabic that maybe is missed in the translation. The word for heart is what? Qalb, right? It's called, the qalb is called the heart. And linguistically the heart is something, the word qalb is something that is always moving. They would say, for example, سُمِّيَ الْقَلْبُ قَلْبًا لِتَقَلُّبِهِ. Right? The heart is called the heart because it's always fidgeting. It's going through emotions. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad, you're worried, not worried, focused, completely heedless. These are emotions and states that our hearts constantly go through. Okay? So the beautiful subtlety in the ayah is the heart that is constantly fidgeting and moving only comes to a standstill when what happens? When Allah's remembrance is established. When Allah's remembrance is there. Okay? That's from the beauty of that ayah. But taking the linguistic benefit also from here, from that ayah, we apply it to the word tatma'inna raki'an, and the application of it to our prayer means we have to be calm and peaceful, not fidgeting, not rushing. It has to resemble a prayer that is, got stillness in it. If it's a prayer that barely you are still, you are constantly moving, barely you find yourself to have a time in the ruku', barely any time is spent standing. Sometimes I see, alhamdulillah not here, but in the haram you see everything, right? In Mecca you see every type of prayer. And sometimes the people are praying, and the man barely stood up after ruku' and he's already in sajdah. The man barely sat between two sajdas, he's already in his second sajdah. That kind of salah lacks the calmness and peace. That is a pillar. So we have to really focus on that. Achieving the calmness and peace that starts at stillness of the body. That's the requirement. And the nice thing to have, or the goal to have, is also a stillness and calmness of the heart, which is the humility and the humbleness. That's a hard thing to achieve. That isn't so easy, but we aim for that. So in conclusion today, what we talked about in things to improve our prayer is looking at the place of sajdah, cuts out distractions. In the ruku', we are making our backs parallel to the ground. That is a action we do intentionally, inshallah, and that makes us, it engages our minds. That's what it does. Make sure that the pillars are being performed correctly. So we make sure they're performed, and then if you are going to focus only in one part of the prayer, focus on Surah Fatiha. Okay? Not that I condone that behavior, but if that is if there's one part to focus on the pillar, focus on Fatiha, then focus on the ruku', because they are the absolute core of the prayer. And then lastly, emphasizing, the 13th number here is emphasizing the tranquility and the calmness that's required in the prayer. The Prophet ﷺ emphasized it. He said this man's prayer didn't qualify because he was missing it, and he explained it very beautifully to him. So this is the recommendations for what would constitute part 3, things during the prayer. Next week, inshallah, I'll share with you some tips of how to make the salah engaging. Okay, these are all physical actions, right? Focus on the way you are standing. Focus on your ruku'. Focus on being still. These are all bodily movements. Next week we'll talk about movement of the mind and the heart. How do you engage the heart so that the prayer becomes more engaging? This is a lifelong journey. It doesn't happen like tomorrow. It's not like, okay, I learned this, switch on, my salah is engaging. It doesn't happen. It really takes a lot of work, but the goal is we need to understand what we're aiming for, inshallah. So those are the things for today. Bi-idhnillah ta'ala, jazakumullah khairan for being such a good audience. We'll take question and answer before we conclude. Yes, Tahir.
Yeah, if the person has a back problem, he cannot stay that in ruku there. What should the person do?
Try your best. The whole idea is if you are able to stand, you stand. If you're not able to stand, you sit down. Same thing for the ruku'. If a person has a bad back, you don't want to strain your back while making a ruku'. You try your best. If a person has for example, bad knees, they can't sit they cannot sit in sajdah peacefully. Okay? Or they can't sit between the two sajdas peacefully. It's just your knees are giving way, right? That's fine. That's just something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will overlook. But this is in a situation where there is no physical ailments. A person is whole physically and sound. Whatever of the prayer's movements cannot be done, they're replaced by something. So if a person is making sajdah by sitting on a chair, the same qualities should apply. Stillness and calmness, even though their head is not on the ground. Okay? If a person is not able to stand, the same qualities should be applied to their sitting and while they're reciting Surah Fatiha. Calmness and peace has to be there. It just represents itself in a different way. Wallahu a'lam. Other questions or comments?
I can
Oh,
another question.
yes, of course.
For example, when you close your eyes and you're reading Surah Fatiha, but your attention is right on the sajdah there. How often you can close the eye or you can not close the eyes?
That's a very good question. What's the time that you can maybe proportionate, or the proportion of time you close your eyes and then you open your eyes? There is nothing like specific on that. There's not like, okay, 30% at 70%, or it's open-ended. The idea is you shouldn't be closed eyes the whole time. That is what is said, and that's what's recommended. Everything else, it's kind of up to the person to figure out whatever their comfort zone is. Allahu a'lam. Other questions or comments? Alright, alhamdulillah. You can ask other generic questions as well. Anything about like the fiqh of the prayer, anything that is pertinent to the topic, or even not, we have some time, inshallah. Yes.
When you sit after the sajdah, they say your leg should be in a certain position. And one leg up and one leg down.
Yes.
That's something like a pillar type thing, or is not necessary?
Excellent questions. How do you sit between the two sajdas? That is not a pillar of the prayer. That is not even an obligation. It is a recommended action. And even some of those recommendations are based on the actions of the Sahaba. Okay, so like a Sahabi would be sitting this way, and that's how he taught his students, and then that is how it became the way we know to pray. Now, the assumption is the Sahabi learned it from the Prophet ﷺ, right? So you're basing it on that assumption. Sometimes it's explicit. The Prophet ﷺ would have his feet up and toes together, toes and heels together when he would be making sajdah. Aisha radiallahu anha found him in that state once in the night prayer. So that's a act the Prophet ﷺ did. His feet were firmly planted and his heels and toes were together. So sometimes we have that, sometimes we don't. But all of those are not obligations. They're not even pillars. They're just recommendations. So, yes.
When you make a sajdah,
yes.
and you should sit back again and make full sitting and stand up, or just one you can stand up there.
Oh, so when you're getting up, right? Okay. So when you're getting up after sajdah, should you sit and then get back up, or should you stand up straight? Okay. So this is something. There is a hadith about this. The Prophet ﷺ did this when he was getting up from sajdah. He would sit and then get up. Now the question is, if the Prophet ﷺ does something once, does that make it something we should do every single time? Or was that something he did once, or he did it on a specific salah, like maybe the night prayer, because it's a long prayer and he's tired and maybe he's sitting to get a little rest. That is where the scholars differ. Okay? That's where the scholars differ. So some would say he did it once, so it's a sunnah and you have to do it, or you should do it. Not have to, you should do it. It's a recommendation. Some would say, not really. The Prophet ﷺ didn't do it on other times. He didn't tell it to this person, the Sahabi. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud would lead salah. He wouldn't pray like this. So they would have other ways to counter that point. Whatever the point is, it is a recommendation. It is not an obligation. It is not a pillar. And it's up to you, but in my opinion, it's not. It's only meant to be when the prayer is long. Okay, so we don't really pray like a really long prayer here, even in Ramadan. Our salah is pretty short. But if you are praying, like there is 3 juz recited in the night, right? 3 juz is a couple of hours at least. And it's like 8 rak'ahs, and mashallah, you're standing for a long time. 1 rak'ah is maybe 25 minutes. Okay? Then when you get up, you deserve a small little break to sit down, and then you get up again. It's more pertinent for that kind of prayer. Wallahu a'lam.
One question.
Yes.
When the Imam say Allahu Akbar,
Hmm.
and we should follow him.
Hmm.
Or make us good.
Yes.
Most of the guys is in the middle
Oh.
of the Imam, they follow him.
Okay.
Wazir asked me, don't start until the Imam is fully sajdah. No, Wazir explain about that.
You're just throwing Brother Wazir under the bus here, huh? But the Wazir was like, what did I do? So I think if I understand your question, Brother Nabil, is that it is, if the Imam is, say, reciting Surah Fatiha silently, like the 3rd rak'ah of Isha, and then you're reciting silently as well, correct? Yes or no? Yes. You are. That's a recommendation, right? Okay. Now the Imam says Allahu Akbar, he goes into ruku', and your Surah Fatiha is not done.
Yes.
What do? Do you finish your Surah Fatiha and then join the Imam in ruku', or do you go into ruku' right away?
No, go right away, follow to Imam.
Go right away, follow the Imam. Any other ideas?
Depends.
Depends?
Depends if you have maybe 2 orders, you finish.
So, if you are like at غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ, for example, then say وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ and then go into ruku'. But if you are anywhere else, like say like you're إِذِنَ الصِّرَاطُ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ and the Imam is in a rush and he's already in ruku', then you follow him and go into ruku'. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ الْإِمَامُ لِيُتَمَّ بِهِ. Imam was made to be followed. So فَإِذَا رَكَعَ فَارْكَعُوا وَإِذَا سَجَدَ فَاسْجُدُوا. So when he goes into ruku', go into ruku' following him. And when he goes into sajdah, go into sajdah following him as well. So the idea is you do it as soon as possible, if not immediately. Okay? Well, what about like, maybe there's another, did I understand the question correctly or no?
No, right.
Okay.
We shouldn't start moving until the Imam completely said Allahu Akbar.
Excellent question again. That was my other thing. I was like, maybe you're asking about that.
Same time you say Allah, same time.
When should you move, right? When the Imam has, like, what is the proper etiquette? The proper etiquette is when the Imam has gone into ruku' and he says Allahu Akbar and gone into ruku', you let him finish his Allahu Akbar and then you follow him. Okay? In sajdah, we find the Prophet going into sajdah and his head would be on the ground, and that's when the Sahaba started their descent into sajdah. Okay? This was one of the sunnah of Wazir is like, see, I told you. I'm not picking any sides, Brother Nabil or Brother Wazir, okay? I'm just telling you what I know. So,
He's my boss.
the Sahaba would wait until the Prophet ﷺ was in the sajdah, and then they would start their descent. Okay? Now, that's the ideal. That's not a pillar, that's not a obligation, that's a what? Recommendation, right? It's a best practice. If a person doesn't do it, it's not like, you tell them, what are you doing? You're messing up your salah. Go back and pray, you haven't prayed. None of that, right? It's just best practices. Wait until the Imam for the sajdah is in the sajdah and then you follow him there. But if a person was to follow the Imam right away, no problem. The only thing they can't do is go before the Imam. That's the only thing. Cannot go before the Imam goes. That is where the problem lies. You cannot stand in front of the Imam. That's where the problem starts. Everything else are recommendations and best practices. Wallahu a'lam. No. Don't go before the Imam and don't be with him. That is, the idea is you have to be after him, right? After him, and that's what the recommendation is. How far after him, that depends, right? And all of that is a recommendation, and not like it's not a fard, it's not a obligation after that. Wallahu a'lam. Barakallahu feekum. Any other questions, comments, things? Yes.
It's not the salah, it's a little bit different than that. The topi.
The topi. Oh man.
Yeah. Somebody asked me in
Yeah.
the mosque that why you wearing this topi? It's not sunnah. So that was very shocking for me. He asked me that, tell me if it's sunnah. Because our messenger always wear the imama. You know, they wear the, what they call it. I don't know, I was confused. I said, brother, I thought all the time it's sunnah. He said, no, it's not sunnah. Then I have no answer for him. But I got confused. I said, I will ask someone. Around the place. I don't know if it's okay to ask or you can give me answer after it's okay too.
Sure. So the funny thing is, I was leading salah once in like this masjid, and I wasn't wearing a topi, a hat, and then I'm leading salah. I'm like, what just happened here? Someone put a hat on my head. Someone brought a hat. They put it on my head as I was leading salah. Yeah, it's one of those plastic ones, huh? So it was a very good, it's like, did I make a mistake in Surah Fatiha? Why am I being like nudged? And it was someone putting a hat on my head, subhanAllah. So the idea of the head covering here for the man, the Prophet ﷺ would wear something that is called al-imama, the turban that was muhannaka, right? It's a imama, and then it would have a little bit of a hanging, but also like hanging and then clipped on here like this. So it kind of covered the beard, with a cloth, and then the head was a turban. Okay, that was the style of the Arabs back in the day. I asked my teacher once. I was like, "Did you ever wear imama muhannaka?" He's like, "In Egypt we don't wear imamas anyway." And we don't even wear muhannaka is a different story. We don't even wear imama. So it goes to then a little bit of the culture of the people, right? The Prophet ﷺ would wear that. It is, if a person was to wear the imama that is with the muhannaka like that, that is and they're saying, I'm doing this because I want to replicate the Prophet ﷺ like literally the same way. Okay, there is reward for that person for the love of the Prophet ﷺ. Not necessarily the turban, right? Because all those actions are considered to be what's called sunnah jibiliya, like actions that are of habits of people. Okay, so there isn't a reward in just replicating that. There is a reward in replicating it with the intention of the love of the Prophet ﷺ. And then the reward is for the love and not the actual thing. So the topi and the hat, the short answer is, it is not in any way a recommendation of the prayer. And in no book will it say recommended that you have a topi on your head. Okay, it's not that. Okay, it's recommended that you read this adhkar, you read that dua, you do this. That's what they recommend. Okay, but if a person is doing it to try to emulate the Prophet ﷺ even in appearance, then the love of the Prophet is what they get the reward for. And sometimes it becomes what's called, I guess, like etiquettes of the community, right? And people should have a certain realization of what is acceptable or not, right? If I was to pray in a caprice pants, is that okay? Of course, it's below my knees, right? But if I was to lead salah, with that, people would be confused. They would say, why is he leading salah in that state? Okay, so people's perception are also important. We're not supposed to just dismiss them outright. It's a great question. The answer was multiple parts. Inshallah. Barakallahu fikum. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you all for coming out again and participating and being such a good audience. My apologies again for not having the PowerPoint, but if you want the notes, please let me know. I will email them to you. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Najib.
Finish, right?
Yes.